Bueno, fenomenal. Somos más de 100 personas en directo viendo pues un webinar sobre influence marketing, ¿no? Un poco frikis, pero bueno, vamos a decirlo sobre la industria del marketing de influencers que tanto interés está despertando, que de tanto se habla, pero lo que queremos hacer con este Influencer Marketing Week es depurar contenido y qué mejor que depurar contenido con los más, vamos a decir, pues empresas, compañías, los players más representativos de la industria. Hemos tenido, como habéis visto, a Social Public, a Ismael, y vamos a tener ahora otra representación internacional, ¿no? Como es Nicolás, que viene como representante de Traackr. Hello, Nicolás, how is going?
Hola, buenas tardes desde París.
Desde
¿Todo
París,
bien?
ok. Muy bien, thank you for joining us, Nicolás. Estamos súper contentos de que Traackr también esté en nuestro evento, porque Traackr es una de las plataformas líderes a nivel mundial. ¿No es así? ¿Desde cuándo hace que está Traackr? Porque está mucho antes de que desde que escucháramos aquí lo que es el influence marketing.
Yes, it's true. Traackr was created in 2009. So I think that's older than Instagram, right?
Yes, imagínate. Oye, amazing. Traackr, Nicolás va a hacer la keynote en inglés, ¿ok? Y te vamos a dejar pues solo ya con la presentación. Vamos a colocar aquí la presentación. Nicolás, what are you talking about today?
So today we will try to understand how the influencer environment has changed over the last 6 months with everything that has happened in the world. Let's try to understand what are the key trends that we have measured mostly in Europe and in the US.
Right. Okay, so interesting. Let's begin.
All right, thank you. So let me just, if you allow me, just say two words to introduce ourselves before we move into the report itself. So at Traackr, so we are a technology company. Traackr is headquartered in San Francisco. We operate from offices in the US and in Europe, but we have clients all over the world. And we're not an agency, we don't run campaigns, but we collect a huge amount of data and we provide you with a platform to optimize your campaign. So Traackr is going to be about running successful campaigns, measuring your impact, organizing your workflow. Traackr is really also mostly for global organization and global brands. So it is for organizations that want to scale their influencer marketing activities across the globe. And really, one of the key benefits that are of the clients that use Traackr is how to optimize your investment, making sure that you invest in the right people, making sure that you make every single dollar work. So let me just, all right. Okay, so sorry guys, I'm just going too fast here. All right. So basically, what Traackr works at different levels. It is, measuring your campaigns. It's going to be about measuring your activities across all of your campaigns, but also measuring your performance at market level. So we capture data on a huge number of influencers. These influencers don't have to connect with us. We really track that data independently, and that allows us to create benchmarking data at a very wide scale. And that's also what has allowed us to aggregate the data that we will present today. As I mentioned, we work mostly with global brands, a lot in the beauty and the fashion industry with people like L'Oreal, Samsung, Coty. And therefore today we're gonna focus mostly on influencers in the beauty, fashion, and the lifestyle space. So let's move on. And let's go into the midst of it, and let's try to understand what has happened over the last 6 months. And in this research, we have collected data from tens of thousands of influencers based in the US and in Europe to try to understand, how they've reacted to the pandemic and what are the new trends that have emerged. And what we've seen is that some of these trends are really an acceleration of the fundamentals of marketing. So let's dive in. First, it's, during the pandemic, it was not just about spending more time on social. It was also a great time to experiment, try new contents, try new formats. Instagram Live, I finally found its groove, and what we've seen in our data is the multiplication of Instagram Live mentions by more than 5 times, 400 to 600%. So Instagram Live, that has taken time to emerge, is finally arriving. Reels are also coming. Reels is the new format that Instagram has launched to compete with TikTok. And after a very, very strong start in August, it's maintaining really high levels on activity. So the question is out there, whether Reels will be able to effectively compete with Instagram. But among influencers, the start has been very strong. But also TikTok has been around for some time, but what we have seen during the pandemic is more specifically a very strong takeoff of the brand's partnerships. We've measured across all of the influencers on Instagram, all the paid collaborations, and we found that they have increased compared to the similar period last year by more than 500%, the number of influencers that have got into paid partnership. What it means is that while the platform is still new, while the numbers are still small, and while there are a lot of uncertainties about the legalities of TikTok, there has been a lot of tensions in the US with President Trump and TikTok, still brands are experimenting, they're running their first campaigns, and they're actually getting a lot of engagement from TikTok as well. Okay. So I'm sorry, my screen is a bit slow, so let's go a bit more specifically about beauty and fashion to understand what's happening in these categories. It's interesting in the beauty, if you look at the global data, and you see how consumers are changing their behaviors and attention. Makeup, that was really the fastest growing category over the past years, has been slowing down during the pandemic. When you are locked down at your home, makeup is not your priority. However, clean beauty, skincare, and even customized hair care, because hair salons were closed, has become the new trends. So it's also about how influencers have been publishing new contents, adapting to the situation, and how some subcategories have started to emerge during the pandemic. If you look at the Spanish market, the situation is relatively similar, where you see skincare winning the game and really becoming the fastest growing category in beauty. However, makeup is resisting a little bit better on the Spanish market than it is in some other markets. Looking at fashion, you see, on the other hand, that again, there's a big change in the dynamics between the categories. Engagement in fast fashion and in luxury is really down. Clearly, it is not the right time to talk a lot about your new Gucci bag, but it's really focusing on maybe activewear. How there's been so much content published during the lockdown about being active at home and how do you practice some sports at home. And again, a lot of focus on brand values, sustainable fashion, which has taken a new spin during the pandemic. So interesting to notice different trends. In Spain, if you look at it, the trend is slightly different, and you can see especially that luxury has resisting much better on the Spanish market. During the pandemic, it's not just influencers that have changed their behaviors, it's also the brands that have changed their behaviors. And clearly, at a time of recession and a time of lockdown and lower consumer spending, there is more scrutiny over budgets. What we have seen very clearly is a very strong drop in the paid collaborations by brands. So this is important because it means that the whole influencer ecosystem has been highly impacted by the pandemic as well. A lot of influencers rely today on brand sponsorship just to make a living. What we've seen as well is that brands have increasingly shifted to the largest influencers. So there have been a lot of talk about micro-influence. I think we've discussed it in the past, in the previous conference. But during this pandemic, what we've seen is brands focus much more on the largest influencers and the largest collaborations. It's true that on the smaller influencers, they can be activated through seedings, through events. And during the lockdown, these tactics and approaches, have not been as prioritized by the brand as working with the big guys. It's also, from our research, interesting to note that while they have a slightly lower engagement rate than the smaller ones, not at all to the scale that, at least in our data, that we've seen in the previous presentation, the VIP and the top influencers are also the most cost-effective channels. And at a time where you're looking for cost efficiencies, it's interesting how the investments of the brand focus on these categories. Okay. Beyond investment, another key trend is a change in the expectations from customers as well. I don't know how you're familiar with the cancel culture, but it has really taken a new dimension during the pandemic. Influencers that have been seen not respecting the lockdown or giving some adverse advice to their followers have been cancelled. And sometimes brands as well have run the risk of being cancelled. And everyone remembers the experience of L'Oreal, where they were accused of not being authentic about their support of communities. And the cancel culture is gaining on the web. And this is an important trend that brands need to be fully aware of because they need to protect themselves against that. Clearly as well, especially in the US, the period has been very strong with an ask for social justice. Black Lives Matter has been very strong in the US, 6,000% increase in content. We've seen also a lot of declination of it in Europe, sometimes using the same hashtag, but also sometimes localized to local social issues. So it's not going to be from influencers, it's going to be not just talking about brands and talking about beauty and talking about fashion, but also taking a stance on social justice and really starting to have a more political as well content. And that really, I think it relates to the increased importance of purpose in brand communication. And we see that, I think Nike is a good illustration of that, but CEOs said that purpose is not just to be nice to the world, it's help them to better understand their consumers, their employees, and to be more profitable brands. And it's not just about purpose, it's about humanizing your brands. And we had, and I invite you to look on our blog, we had a great interview from the director of global communication for Dove. You know that Dove, this brand from Unilever, has a very strong purpose. Brand is about authentic beauty, it's about authentic women. And as Firdaus puts it, brands are part of society. They're part of social movement. They have a play. And because they're part of, the messages that are out there on the web, it is important that brands take a positive stance on the world as well. And it's interesting how for Dove, having a purpose is core to also the whole ecosystem of the brand and the profitability of the brand. And it's very interesting how having a strong purpose also is helping Dove generating authentic relationship with their influencers, getting through the risk of cancel culture, and always be connecting with these consumers that expect more from influencers than just talking about soap and beauty. So if you look about that, consciousness on cost, new demands from consumers, really the question from brands is how can I do more with less? And how do I have access to the tools that's going to enable me to really optimize my campaigns and my communication? And for example, at Traackr, we have developed this very simple framework where we invite you to think about your own influencer marketing campaigns using that framework that you can create yourself, where you could map your investment per post and the engagement generated. And when you start looking at your investment in that way, it will very easily, you can start mapping out the influencers that are let's say the influencers that will deliver most value for your money to those that maybe you should avoid. And we see increasingly brands using these types of approach to really optimize the portfolio of their collaboration. Guys, if you really cost me that much and deliver that much of engagement, I cannot continue working with you anymore. And I want to build exclusive partnerships with people that are in the blue area. These are the people that I want to collaborate with. These are the people that I want to engage with in the long term. So focusing on ROI and developing the tools and the data set that will enable you to do that is also becoming a priority for many marketers. Because complexity in influencer marketing is not a liability. And complexity and managing complexity will be key or critical for brands who want to build a competitive advantage. I have to say, without being polemical, that I've been slightly shocked that you can send influencers just the same picture to tens of influencers and ask them to just publish it with the hashtag ad. I think that sort of campaigns negates complexity. It negates complexity of influencer marketing, complexity, it negates the complexity of performance, but also it negates the complexity of the relationship that influencers have with their audience. And what we see is the most advanced organization developing the tools to manage that complexity. And that means, how do I align my organizations? How do I start managing influencer marketing as part of my global influencer budget? How does influencer marketing fit within my paid strategy, within my CRM strategy? How do I allocate the resource? How do I decide whether I invest in this influencer, in my influencer marketing campaign, or on other marketing tactics? What is the technology that's going to enable me to have a 360-degree view of my investment and what is actually delivering more value for my brand and for my business? So really what we've seen emerge in the last 6 months is new trends in terms of new platforms. We've seen the emergence of new categories, new types of content. We've seen the emergence of brand value and purpose coming very strong. And we've seen brands tackling complexity with new tools to optimize their ROI. Thank you very much. I don't know if there are any questions, maybe that I can answer if we have a bit more time.
Hola. Hi. Hi.
Hello.
Here we have some questions for you. The first one is, what's your opinion of using influencers on luxury field? Do you think it's helpful? It's helpful to boost the sales or not?
It's interesting. The use of word is interesting as well. I think using influencers is, I think, maybe not the right word, but collaborating with influencers. Well, luxury brands have a very strong organic presence anyway. So luxury brands are already very well represented through influencers through just organic publication. Now, the challenge that influencer brands have is, so they have a challenge, which is that their target is very niche. So having some very strong data point to ensure that the influence, the investment that they're making will really reach the right target is absolutely key. They don't need to have a huge reach, but they need to talk to the right people. The second challenge is a bit more cultural. Luxury brands historically are really, let's say, anxious to release control. And this is probably an evolution that they will have to go through. If you want to be successful in your influencer collaboration, I don't believe at all that you can send them a picture that they can publish as it is. You collaborate with influencers so that they bring their own editorial content, so that they bring their own angle. And for luxury brands, it means that you have to build a very trusted relationship with that influencers. To entrust an influencer with producing content around your brand means that you probably have to engage in a long-term relationship with them. So it's true that luxury brands also probably always have had a specific approach to influencer marketing, but more and more they are engaging in it.
Oh, that's so interesting. We have more questions. I think that people like so much your presentations because there are so many people who's asking now. Here we have another one. Have you seen a rate of engagement of brands that had more social messages than those that have more brand product oriented messages? What do you think about that?
It is an interesting question, and it is true that when we looked at, for example, the content that has been published around social justice, these have generated a huge amount of engagement, and it is true that a content that has a meaning, has a purpose, will generate more engagement than just product. But you see, really, I think I think what brands are trying to do is to not exclude purpose from the product. So the challenge that, for example, people like Dove are trying to work on very well is connect the product with the purpose. And that really generates strong engagement, but also it's not just quantitative, it's also qualitative. So the quality of the engagement and of the comments and the positiveness of the comment is important as well.
We have another question here. Here they think that there are so many social profiles that humanize their profiles, and it's like, in which do you think you will recommend it, or in which you won't recommend it? For example, there are so many, so it isn't gonna work in every brand. So in which cases would you recommend?
To socialize your social profile as a brand, you mean? I think that's the whole point of doing influencer marketing. So I'm not sure I understand precisely the question. I think the whole reason why you use influencers is not to just get reach. There are lots of different ways to get reach. The reason for collaborating with influencers is also to create trust with the brand. Okay, because the influencer is the channel, or let's say the spokesperson, that will give credibility to your brand and to your message. And with a human face, that's why we're so much advocating for the influencer publishing their own content with their own style and make the brand a real part of the lives of the influencers. So I don't think that's a trend that's going to slow down. I think that's a trend that's going to become stronger. And the challenge that the brands have is, how do I combine humanization, which means one-to-one, which means unique content, with scale? So how do I combine being able to run campaigns at a global level, at a scale that's going to change my marketing mix, with being human with each content? And that's really the operational challenge that sits behind influencer marketing, that somehow technology aims to resolve without having to send everyone with the same picture.
There are more questions for you. There are so many questions today. Here we have one. Is the purpose before profit movement stronger in the US?
You are busy today.
You are so busy today.
So, like many things, yes, the US is a bit early, I think, on this topic, and also the scale and the proportion of this discussion. I mean, if you talk Black Lives Matters, naturally it has been led by the US, and it has been much stronger in the US because of the reality over there as well. We also know that they have been in a very tense political situation over the last 6 months. But it was interesting that it's not just a US thing. So yes, strong in the US, it is true. But everything is a bit strong in the US when you talk about social. However, what we have seen is that very quickly, influencers have connected across the borders. Usually it starts with the UK, who is extremely connected, through English language. And then the whole continent has taken on. So as usual, yes, the US leads the way, especially in terms of power of these social accounts, but very quickly Europe gets on board, and we've had a lot of examples, especially in the UK, for example, of influencers that have taken a very strong social stance, and also influencers that are challenging the brands, and influencers that are challenging the brands that they collaborate with, influencers that are reevaluating their collaboration based on the purpose of the brand. So it's very interesting as well how the influencers also act as a channel from the consumers towards the brand as well. So it's not just the brands talking to the audiences through the influencers, but also the influencers speaking a spokesperson to the brands. And I think that's a very enriching relationships for any marketer.
And I promise this is the last one. What do you recommend? She's asking for advice because she's starting in influencer marketing here in Spain, and how she can anticipate to the movement of the influencer marketing here in Spain. What would she recommend?
Well, I think it's interesting because in the early days of influencer marketing, it was all about one-to-one relationship. And then when we talked about scaling, there was a lot about automation and standardization. But I think now what brands are realizing is this is not the way to success. So my recommendation is to really think hard about how you're going to be able to create a scalable influencer marketing program that's going to combine scale, data, impact, but unique content and connection with your audience. Connecting with your audience is really the whole purpose of engaging with influencer marketing. And that's the complexity that I will invite this person to focus on.
That's all for today. There were so many questions. Your presentation was so interesting, so the people wanted to know more. And Now,
Okay, okay, Nicolas, thank you so much. We appreciate a lot you are here with us, and let's see. Okay.
Thank you very much. Muchas gracias.